Good evening, welcome to our NHS show today on Socialist Telly. I'm joined today by some of the finest hospital and GP campaigners in England. I would like each of them to have a few minutes to introduce themselves. So as people are appearing on my screen, I'll start with Jenny Hurley. Jenny, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you're doing for the NHS?
Yeah, I'm Jenny Hurley. We're part of the Chorley and South Ribble Hospital campaign. They shut our A&E back in April 2016. We got it opened for 12 hours again in 2017. The campaign, as we've been going along, we started realising the cuts weren't just local to us, they were regional. Then we started realising they were national, and we started the legislation. And, you know, about 5 years on, we're now campaigning across the country, but mainly focusing on local and regional as well. You know, we can all do the national campaigns, but we're getting these cuts within hospitals and within GPs right across our region. And everybody really needs to look at what's happening locally, regionally, and nationally. Once those services are gone, it's when people can't access healthcare, and that's when you start getting that two-tier healthcare system, and that's where people start missing out on actually receiving healthcare. So we're pushing on with that at the moment. I can go into a little bit more detail on all that later on if you like. It's moved along quite a bit.
I mean, that's great. That's great. What we'll do is we'll just go around each of you, hear what you've got to say, and then we'll draw out some of the details, because you guys are really setting an excellent example of what every concerned citizen needs to be doing, in my opinion. Next up, I've got Michelle. Would you like to tell us a bit about your campaigning, please?
Hi, Bonnie. Yes. Well, 5 years ago, I was one of the last people in Southport to get a mammogram from the local hospital. And 2 weeks later, when I got the results and my breast cancer diagnosis, they'd moved the whole department out of Southport Hospital, and I had to go to Aintree to get my results and much of my treatment. And then I started doing a bit more digging and found out how many other services had disappeared from our hospital. And we'd lost children's A&E, we lost maternity, breast cancer services. Since then we lost stroke services, physiotherapy. At the end of July, they shut the surgical ward, and they gave the laundry staff their notice. And we've just had the second chief exec in less than 2 years hand in their notice. So it's been salami sliced. So that's how I got involved. In fact, Mary and I set up, with Judith and a few others, set up our campaign, and we've been working on that ever since.
That's fantastic. I'm sorry to hear the troubles you've had, but if something's going to motivate us, it's when we're experiencing detriment because of the cuts and the chopping away.
For me, this is personal. The NHS saved my life. They saved my husband's life. And so I want to save it because I think I need to return that favour.
Yeah, it's a bit of a debt, isn't it, to our society fighting for our NHS. Mary, you've been on Socialist Telly before. It's good to have you back. Thank you. For the purposes of this show, if anyone didn't catch the last one, would you like to tell us a little bit about your campaigning work for the NHS?
Well, I mean, again, I've been a lifelong user of the NHS. I have a lifelong illness, and again, so you know, there is also a personal interest in it. But I got involved with the Save Liverpool Women's campaign that Felicity will talk about, and then found out how at risk our local hospitals in Southport and Ormskirk were. So as Michelle said, we set up the Save Ormskirk and Southport Hospital campaign, and it was to save both hospitals and to make sure that they weren't played off against each other, and and to keep those services in the community. Since then, I've got involved in more campaigns. So I'm the chair of the Socialist Health Association Liverpool City Region branch, and also in Keep Our NHS Public and all the other Defend Our NHS World. And so what I've been doing over the summer is going around different campaigns and trying to spread the word. Felicity set up a Cheshire and Merseyside wide campaign of all the different groups. So I've just been working in that really over the summer and doing whatever we can, popping up here and there all over the place.
Yeah,
and we've been
tireless.
We've been involved in the Don't Blow It campaign that Jenny Shepherd has set up as well. So we've been helping with that.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about Don't Blow It, Mary, please?
Yeah, well, the idea of it was that the bill was pushed through and we needed to work on the MPs to make it impossible for them to vote for the bill on the next reading. So the idea was to raise awareness in the constituencies and to get the local people to put pressure on their MP to say, we really object to what's happening with the NHS and we want you to oppose this health and care bill when it comes back to Parliament in the autumn. And so what we, because all the Labour MPs voted against the bill on the second reading, we decided we would target the Tory MPs who all voted it through. So there are 11 of them in Lancashire, and we decided to visit every single constituency. It was a collective effort. So Jenny Hurley's campaign group were involved as well, and we've just had fun going around all the different constituencies. We've held stalls outside their offices, we've leafleted people, we've done petitions, and we've tried to hand them a hand embroidered handkerchief, and for some reason they didn't really seem to want to accept the handkerchiefs from us, and they were quite often not in when we knocked on their door. And on the one occasion, well, there were two occasions now, we've managed to actually speak to an MP. We've spoken to one, she didn't want to take the handkerchief, and the other one wasn't there, but her dad took the handkerchief and then accused us of intimidating the staff and surrounding them. And I managed to somehow do that all by myself, surrounded all the staff and intimidated them all by myself.
Well, you're obviously a woman with more power than you realise. It's fantastic. Felicity, would you tell us something about what you've been doing, please?
Yeah, for us, the campaign to save Liverpool Women's started in 2015. First, there was a panorama programme that announced that there was going to be one of the Liverpool hospitals closing. And then, ba-boom, they announced that Liverpool Women's would be moving into the Royal. Now, I was teaching at the time, and it was a late night because I had Ofsted, and I just went berserk when I heard this announcement and set up the 38 Degrees petition. And the next day, while I was in work, against all the rules, family phoned me and said, have you seen that petition? It's in the thousands already. So we got this huge response from the public, and we started fighting for it. Now, the Women's Hospital in Liverpool is about 25 years old. It's a modern hospital on a garden site away from the city centre. Where they were trying to put it was on the same site as the Royal. Now, some of you know that the Royal Hospital was a PFI. They were rebuilding it as a PFI, and it's been a walking catastrophe. It's still not built. It still has huge problems, and the staff and the patients are in the old one, which is falling to pieces. And it's the centre of probably the densest traffic in Liverpool. We just we don't want to lose the existing building, and we don't want to lose the fact it's a women's hospital. And secondly, we don't want it in that polluted site. We just don't want it there. But as we got more involved in the campaign, and honestly, the people of Liverpool were just brilliant about it. We did the Race for Life. We leafleted and had a stall at the Race for Life. We did all the festivals that were in the city. We did streets, we did shopping centres. We just went everywhere on this issue, aiming at the younger women in the community. And I think, I can't remember how many thousands we've got on that petition, but we're starting it again, because today I was at the hospital board and they announced they're going to try it again to move to the Royal. Now, behind it all is a very real issue that maternity is massively underfunded in this country. There's scandal after scandal all around the country. And apart from A&Es, maternity has been one of the biggest things closed in the hospitals. And if they're going to close a hospital, they start with either maternity or A&E. And, we know from some other campaigns that, women are having to travel a long way to give birth, and that it's not safe. It's not a safe thing to do. Now, in Parliament the other month, they stood up and said England was the safest place to give birth. Well, it just isn't. They read out a list of places that were safer than, but ignored most of the core European countries. We're not even in the top 10 of the safest places to give birth. So we're not about to give up the women's. Mersey pensioners, who are fantastic, came up with the statement that what we have, we hold. We're not prepared to listen to them when they say, oh, it might be better if they did this. No, we've lost so much. What we have, we hold. Now, the women's, so the stuff that Mary's been doing, I think we really need to get out to people. It's great fun taking the campaign for the NHS out to the population. Don't listen to people who say, oh dear, they've got an 80-seat majority. They haven't got people's heads. If you get out there and fight, you can build a campaign and have a thoroughly good time at the same time. But we have to fight for the staff, for our services, and for this thing of being free at the point of need and universal. And the universal bit comes to me, the last bit I'll say in this. It's maternity care is not free for everybody. Many, many migrant women end up with huge bills for using maternity care. And it is horrible. Technically, you're not allowed to turn them away. But they know that they can face huge £10,000 bills. So, along with fighting to keep the Women's Hospital where it is, in Liverpool 8, on the garden site, stopping it going into the Royal, protecting the services, we're also campaigning nationally for the maternity services. And we've got a day school coming up on that, which we'll talk about later.
Well, that's a really comprehensive review. Thank you, Felicity. Actually, from what you were saying there, I think it's really important to emphasise where these cuts to provision are falling mostly. It seems that a lot of existing hospitals, the first things to go are A&E and women's services, including maternity. And these are all being chopped off from the NHS provision, probably to land in some private company's lap. But it is women and children's services being taken are amongst the first things. Then after that, you have downgrading of units for coronary care and cancer care, all those kind of little packets of healthcare that can be very easily be bundled up and given to someone to line their pockets with in a private company. This pattern has been repeated right across England, and obviously the Health and Social Care Act 2012 set a lot of this in train. But as I think you mentioned it, Mary, the legislation that's going through at the moment is even more pernicious than the Health and Social Care Act 2012. Could you explain why? How is it worse? How could it be worse?
Yeah, well, it's legalizing the restructuring that they've already done. They've done it without any statutory authority to do it, and without a political mandate. And they've broken up the NHS. They've effectively denationalised it into 42 separate businesses, which will be run by a board that can have private companies sitting on that board deciding what services will be offered, which of us will be able to access those services, and which companies will get those contracts. And it will have a cap budget. So all the services have to come out of that cap budget. And one ICS leader said about a year ago, any pound spent outside my ICS is a pound lost to my ICS, which sounds good, but if you access services across a border in a different ICS, that's a concern. And we've recently heard from a campaigner about a friend of his who took ill on the Isle of Wight, but she was from another part of the country, and they spent 24 hours arguing about whose budget it was going to come out of to transfer that person back to their home area. So that's a real concern. And then added to that, there are concerns for the staff, for the terms and conditions of the staff, the possible loss of national collective bargaining if local pay deals are agreed, the flexibility, the staff can be forced to work anywhere in the system, in that footprint. And, in Lancashire and South Cumbria, it's a huge geographical area, covering, and Merseyside, Cheshire and Merseyside is one of the biggest integrated care systems, covering, I think it's 2.7 million people. So the staff can be forced to be flexible, and so can the patients. We could be set when they're centralising all these services, and at the moment in Cheshire, Merseyside, they're centralising hyperacute stroke services and blood cancers. So it means you could be having to travel much, much further, and those services will be shrunken as well. So they're being rationed. So that there's all sorts of things, rationing, downskilling of staff, expecting staff to work beyond their competencies, doing more for less, and deregulating the professions. It's a nightmare. And added to that, there's no obligation on anybody, any organisation, to actually provide secondary care. So there's a whole host of absolutely awful things in this bill that will be legalised, but they have already put all these changes in motion. They're just looking for the legislation now to legalise what they've done and put it, to formalise it.
Yeah, it's very, very concerning, isn't it? I mean, from the Health and Social Care Act in 2012, there was one small provision. It was called Section 75. And what that meant was any contract that goes out has to be put out for tender, and there needs to be some degree of transparency, although not complete transparency because it's company information. But the new legislation, as I understand it, is removing the demand that they do properly tender it, or that there's any scrutiny over the bids when they're awarded. What are your thoughts on that, Jenny?
Well, it's huge. I mean, what we're going through now here, they started off, like I said, closing with the closure of RA&E. Now, Matt Hancock, at the start of this year, suddenly announced that Chorley A&E will now never be closed. And everybody locally went, "Yay, we've won." What he didn't say was, like, in the small print, was that until the new business plans are actually in place. Well, the day before, our Integrated Care System Board announced this new hospital programme. Now, we are currently fighting for accessibility to the engagement side of this, mainly because the plans they are putting through now are all about the services that they're going to move, that no service will be repeated across our footprint. So your heart services will only be in one of the hospitals. I was in hospital having a scan this is about 4 years back. I didn't ask too much because this poor lady, was sat there in this open backed robe in the middle of a corridor, so you don't want to ask too much. But we were having a chat, and she actually said that she had to come down to Chorley to see the consultant because it was the only place in the whole of Lancashire and South Cumbria that provided her consultancy. She came from Kendal, which is the other side of our footprint. So, you know, it's all this new hospital programme that we're going into now. We are looking at what is actually going to be, what services. We want to know what services are going to be provided, where, when, how and when. You know, because as Mary said, the health and care bill, first of all, there's no obligation for this ICS to provide any secondary care. So they don't actually have to provide these hospital services. So when we are now going into this new hospital programme where they're transforming all our hospital services across Lancashire and South Cumbria, and this actually affects Michelle at Save Ormskirk and Southport hospitals as well, because although they're in the same footprint as us, their hospital services are being moved to Cheshire and Merseyside. So they're splitting it further again. And of course, with us not having any view, we can't see what these non-tenders are going to be for every service. They could go anywhere. We don't know where they're going to move them. We have no way of holding them to accountability on any single level of it. We're currently organising meetings with Health Watch groups. We're looking at the Integrated Care System Board. They've sent me just yesterday an email with 5 different ways to get involved in the public engagement programmes. I've gone to access these programmes 6 weeks, 2 months ago, and I haven't received one response. So we're not getting any accessibility. There's no accountability to anybody. If this health and care bill comes through, the other thing that happens, your Integrated Care System Board, whereas now I've got local councillors and I've got county councillors all sitting on various boards that have input, we have one councillor to sit for us in county. Well, that's going from like 20 at a health scrutiny meeting to just one councillor. There's no accountability for it whatsoever. The public don't know what's happening. The your elected representatives don't know what's happening. And because a lot of these services are going out to private companies as well, to the partner groups, they're hidden under corporate law legislation as well. So they don't have to give any of that information out. We've had so many freedom of information requests on information that just go unanswered.
Wow. Michelle, can you tell us a bit more? I mean, they've been mentioned a couple of times in this programme and we seem to talk about them every NHS show, but can you explain a bit more what integrated care systems are and what their purpose is, or what damage they might bring to the NHS?
Well, basically, it's the American privatised healthcare system. The idea is that you, as Mary was explaining, you'll have a capped budget, so there'll be a certain amount, say, for hip operations. So if 1 year there are a lot of people who need hip operations, you might use up all the budget by July, and so if you need a hip operation in September, you've had it. You're going to have to wait another year. And I mean, we're talking now about a situation where we've got over 5 million people on waiting lists because of COVID, and they're looking to cut even more from NHS services. The ICS is that one of the other things is that they're going to change the rules regarding how people get discharged from hospital, because at the moment, if you're an elderly person, you can't just get chucked out of hospital. They have to make sure that when you leave hospital that you're going somewhere that's safe and that your care can continue. Well, they're going to absolutely abolish that. I mean, there was a horror story from our local hospital recently about somebody being discharged in the middle of the night with just a towel wrapped around their nether regions. Now, don't know the surroundings to that, but this sort of thing is going to become commonplace if this legislation is passed.
Yeah, it's very, very troublesome. I remember putting a motion forward at Labour Party conference in 2016. And in the speech, I spoke about the 42 footprints. And what these are is because health is a devolved matter, we're actually only talking about NHS England for now, although there are still problems in Scotland, Wales and Ireland as well. The plan back then that we could see from the 2012 Act was for there to be coincidentally 42 hospitals available to us. So that's one hospital per footprint. And my own personal footprint is Southwest London. And if they achieve this one hospital for the whole footprint, that means we're going to lose Helley Hospital, Epsom Hospital, Kingston Hospital, and Croydon Hospital. And people living all of those surrounding areas, halfway down into Surrey, will have to travel into Tooting to be looked after. And as it happens, the single hospital that they're looking for us all to travel to already regularly shuts its doors to A&E and women in labour. And they have to go somewhere else and find somewhere to deliver their baby or to tend to their severed hand or whatever accident they've had. It's really quite a concern. But yeah, so what we're seeing as well, I don't know if it's the same for all of you, but here in Southwest London, what we're seeing is an attempt, and we've been fighting this for well over a decade, and it's had different names: better services, better value, better care closer to home, all sorts of names. They're all just different names for the same thing. And the long short story short is they're wanting to remove services from our NHS provision and encourage people to go down the route of jumping the queue and paying some money to a private provider. But what's also happening here is where the two hospitals that are most at risk, which are St Helier and Epsom hospitals, they're both serving economically deprived parts of the town, of the constituency. Where they're looking to move services to is to one of the most affluent parts of Southwest London, and there's going to be no walk-in A&E. You can only attend A&E either under blue lights on an ambulance or by being referred there by their GP. Now, I know sometimes people, we're told that people abuse A&E when they should go to their doctors, but right now it's nigh on impossible in this part of London to get an appointment with your doctor within 3 weeks. So they're doing things that are going to put pressure on our NHS, make people feel more resentful for it. And obviously, huge amounts of the NHS budget are going straight out into the pockets of shareholders and chief executives and so on. So I know Liverpool Women's Hospital is one of the ones going. Tell me about the economic situation for the hospitals that are going versus where they're looking to move services to. Is it just us?
Liverpool Women's Hospital is right in Liverpool 8. It's in the middle of the black area. To the back of it has been gentrified. It's the Georgian Quarter, and those, I don't know if you saw the programme The House, but the houses which used to house multiple families has now been taken over as single family residence for richer people. And the land that the women stands on is now immensely valuable. But just over the road is some of the poorest people in the city. Now there's also a history to the Women's Hospital in that it was built on the site of where someone was killed by the police in the riots, and it was built as a kind of reparation to the community. It's holy land, it's really important to the community that it stays there, and it is a beautiful site. It's grass, it's trees, it's a low-rise building, and they've just put 20 million, I think, neonatal unit onto it as well. So it's utterly ridiculous what they're talking about. But the fact it's a women's hospital picks up something of what you're saying, Bonnie. Women's health has deteriorated during the period of austerity. Life expectancy for women, for working class women's gone down, and so has life expectancy in good health. Now, just let me stick on the women's for a minute. What we find is that older women who go into the women's for gynae kind of treatment love it because they feel they're cared for there. When we're doing our petitions, it's something that always comes up. Oh, they treated us so well. And it was set up as a good women's hospital with that women's ethos there and looking after people. Something like 9 out of 10 of all babies born in Liverpool are born in that hospital. But like all hospitals, there's women's hospitals, maternity hospitals, they're suffering because maternity is not funded properly. A standalone women's hospital basically can't survive financially. In a general hospital, the maternity would be, would be funded by the rest. But what's her name? Donna Ockenden, who did the Ockenden report on the Shropshire scandal over baby deaths, she said that in a general hospital, maternity is always at the back of the trust's thinking, and whereas it should be seen as a front door thing. And many staff during the pandemic, not so much from the women's, but from other hospitals with maternity attached, the maternity staff were diverted to COVID, and that was utterly wrong. You don't divert the A&E to COVID. It's a frontline service. Women can't choose when they give birth. So you've got all of this. You've got the privatisation thing, and we had a private midwifery service that went bust here. And you've got the privatisation, you've got the rationing and cutting of care and trying to build up the private sector. And you've got the fact that women's health isn't even mentioned in the bill. We Googled it, not Googled, we searched the PDF. There are 3 mentions in the bill, all of which are subclause so-and-so, so-and-so, and women's is in a list. Neither maternity nor women's health is mentioned in this bill. And we've got to shout from the top of the rooftops about that. Our health is deteriorating. Women's health is deteriorating. Women's services are deteriorating. And maternity is in crisis. And they can't be bothered to mention it. We've got to campaign on that.
Very well said. Michelle, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to carry on from what Felicity was saying, because I think a lot of the time people say, oh, well, the country spent so much, COVID has been terrible and blah, 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 we can't afford it. But there's this recent Oxfam report, I don't know if you've seen it, published on the 12th of August. And they were suggesting that a one-off 99% tax on the gains that billionaires have made during COVID, because they have absolutely minted it during COVID, that would raise £4 trillion and still leave them $55 billion and £40 billion richer than they were before COVID started. And that would actually pay for, what does they say? It would pay for COVID-19 jabs for the whole world. They're saying billionaire wealth has increased more over the past 17 months than it has in the past 15 years. And we have 325 new billionaires who've joined the Forbes Billionaire Club since the pandemic began, equivalent to roughly 1 new billionaire minted every day of the COVID crisis. So, it kind of puts things in perspective. And the other thing I wanted to say, and that I've been saying, we've been out campaigning today, and one thing I've been saying to people is, explaining the situation that, in Southport, when the NHS was founded, we had 7 hospitals in this town, and we now have 1.5. I say half because our main hospital, Southport Hospital, was built, and it was planned to be built in 2 stages. and the entrance, which is currently at one end, was meant to be in the middle. So they built one half, and then they ran out of money, and they cut so many. They've got such a financial hole, and they've cut so many services that they ended up selling off all the land that they were going to build the second half of the hospital down. Now, the excuse that was given was that, we couldn't build on there because the hospital's sinking. It was a tip, this land, and so it's not suitable for building. But they've built a housing estate on it. So it's funny that it was okay for the houses, but not for the hospital, which is only 2 stories. And so we're left in this ridiculous situation where we've got more people living in Southport than ever. You know, we've built more and more housing estates, but we've only got half a hospital. The other hospital has just been opened. We're quite unusual. We've actually got a new mental health hospital, but the one it replaced, which is one of the ones that was closed down, the one that was closed down was called Greaves Hall, and that had 1,000 members of staff. And the new hospital that's just taken over, bear in mind we've got this larger population now, is 40 beds. You know, there's no comparison. But before people get too despondent about all the losses and stuff, I say, you know, this time last year, a footballer got the country to get behind him and push the government into a U-turn over feeding kids during the summer holidays. Now, we're the nation that stood on our doorsteps week in, week out, clapping the NHS, you know, for what they were doing to keep us all going during COVID. And I think the nation that did that, when they wake up to what this legislation actually means, and then when they realise what is happening on their doorsteps and throughout the country, I think people will come together and put pressure on the government, and we can get a U-turn for this as well. I really do believe that.
Definitely power to the people. At the end of the day, nothing's ever been given to us as working class people. We've had to fight tooth and nail for every single thing. And, you know, I've benefited from the NHS my whole life. My children have so far. I'd like them to be able to still benefit from it now, because it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have an NHS at all. And I know that the fear of how much it would cost to see a doctor before the NHS meant that most working class people didn't see a doctor and died in ways that possibly could have been avoided just because they couldn't afford to pay for a doctor. And obviously, with the ICS system being based on the American health insurance model, we know that in America, the biggest cause of bankruptcy is healthcare bills. And yet the United States spend more per capita on healthcare than we do in this country. What we've got is actually a really efficient, really effective, really good health system that benefits the whole of our society. Jenny, when you go out and do street stalls, what sort of response do you get from the general public?
We get quite a mixture, you know. A lot of people say how terrible it is. I mean, get a petition and people come running to you. They'll listen to you. But I was about to say, you know, like they were saying about, we do get a lot of, they'll never do it. They'll never privatise the NHS. People don't believe it's happening. But they're doing it, you know. Every time you can't get that GP appointment because waiting times are being pushed out, that's creating a 2-tier system where your only option is to go and pay to go private. When you can't get that consultancy or have your tests done, your only option is to pay to go private. And I think this is the side of it that people don't really think about. You know, think about when you get your car insurance or your holiday insurance. You know, the higher the risk you are, the more you pay out. And it's the same with health insurance. Insurance is not all inclusive. The NHS is supposed to be all inclusive for every single person, regardless of a means to pay. But, you know, insurance isn't. Those high risk, high cost groups, maternity is one, A&E is another. We've discussed those all the way through this meeting because they're the ones that are being hit the hardest and the fastest because they cost the most. They are the most financial risk going. So they're the ones being cut back. And that's why we're hearing it. You know, people just need to think, how are they gonna privatise it without us noticing? Well, they cut it back. You've got to think that the other side of privatisation isn't having private companies run it. That's not the only way that they can privatise it. The other side of it is private health insurance. That's the other money maker in it. And what do? You cut the services back, especially the expensive ones, and people are forced to go out and use the health insurance. You know, the more times you have to go and pay, the more people will go out there and get health insurance, and that's how they're going to make the money on that. The third big way that they're going to privatise it is to have private companies holding your budget. So you've got 42 ICS boards across this, which is 42 business sections of your NHS, and your ICS hold the budget. You know, there are private companies starting to sit on those ICS boards now. 10 years down the line, you are going to have private companies who will decide what that money's spent on. So, you know, when people say to us, you know, they'll never do it. They are already doing it bit by bit. And you will all end up within 10 years. I'd like to know, I always ask people, have you or anyone you know had to go and pay for treatment because you couldn't get it on the NHS? Well, yeah, my uncle had to wait 6 months, 9 months. So in the end, he went private. It's already started. You do get a lot of it. You do get a lot of people that don't believe it's happening. I just wish they would see what's happening and come and join us.
My mother paid £300 a month to Bupa, and she became ill about 3 New Year's Eves ago and ended up in A&E. And she was in a cupboard in A&E for 48 hours before they found her a bed. And when she finally got a bed, it was Monday morning. And my sister rang up Bupa on her behalf, and they said, "Oh, we can't do anything for her. You know, she'll have to go to an NHS A&E." She was already there. But this, you know, anyone who's dealt with an insurance company over a car claim or anything will know that insurance companies are there to make money. They're not there to look after you. And that is exactly the same with private insurance.
It's an exclusive service. It's very exclusive.
They'll welcome you in when you're well, and they'll kick you out when you're ill.
Well, anyone who's got a pet and pet insurance knows that there is a limit to how much treatment will be funded by an insurance company. And until recently, private healthcare insurance has been like a little luxury that some people can have as a sort of top up. But as soon as the NHS is decimated any further, we're going to see that becomes a necessity for people to just stay alive. And once it's a necessity, those premiums will also go right up through the roof because they've got a captive market there. So we need to really, really fight against that. Someone's popped into the comments that we've got till November to stop the bill. The final reading is in November. So everybody out there really needs to make sure that they speak with their neighbours, let their friends and family know what is being done to our NHS. I'm absolutely disgusted with the behaviour of so many of our representatives in Parliament, whichever side of the House they sit in. At the moment, the people that are showing leadership, as far as I'm concerned, on the NHS in Parliament are people like John Trickett, who has been putting out recently a lot of tweets about the attacks on our NHS. But I want to be seeing everybody, every MP, be concerned for the health and well-being of the people whose votes they're going to depend on when the next election comes, whenever that might be. So if people could contact their local hospital campaign group, there will be one. I guarantee it, that there will be a local campaign group for your hospital or your GP services, wherever you live in England. Please look them up. Have a look on Facebook. I think you've all got a presence on social media as well. Can you tell me where people can find you, please? We'll start with Jenny.
Yeah, where the easiest place to contact us would be probably Facebook, and it's Protect Chorley and South Ribble Hospital campaign. It's a black banner with yellow writing, and we're on there all the time. We're campaigning, as Mary said. You know, me and Mary have been out with the Don't Blow It campaign, so we've been campaigning against the Health and Care Bill. We'll also be doing regional stuff. If you're from a different area, we'll be able to point you into the direction of local places as well. But you can either pop on there. I'm Jenny Hurley. You can drop me a message, or you can just message the page, and we will give you any information anybody wants, even if it's in different parts of the country, because we all seem to know each other. If I don't know somebody, we'll be able to sort it out between us, I'm sure. We'll go into a chat and go, does anyone know anyone from down there? And we will be able to find someone. So do get in touch. We all speak. I was at Grantham yesterday, and they have a very similar thing with their A&E and their hospitals that's happening in our footprint. So, you know, we're all in contact with each other. By all means, come over, join the page, keep on top of what's happening nationally. Not to forget fighting for your staff, because if we don't have the staff, we don't have an NHS. They're currently being obliterated in the workplace. Their training schemes have been cut for years and years. Their bursaries have gone. They had a 1% pay cap for 8 years. They were then given what was supposed to be a 6% pay rise. I was speaking to one nurse in London. The reality of that for her was 1 pence a month. That was 3 years ago. The government then said they're going to offer them 1%. They've sort of put it to 3% now. But the staff are asking for a 15% pay rise. They've had a 20% pay cut since 2010 in real terms. They're asking for 15 now. All public sector workers, except healthcare workers, got a 3% pay rise as a thanks for COVID last year. The healthcare workers did not. So they should be getting this 15% now, just to bring them somewhere within the norms of what they were earning in 2010. There's also a clap for care workers. I can't remember what it's called now. That is on Saturday, and this is our more of our care workers, not necessarily our nurses. They're in the private sector. Their wages are even worse. They need to be brought up. Their wages need to be brought up so that we can attract. That is the market value. If you do not have enough staff, you have to pay the staff to get them in there. Pay them the market value. Get our staff back up. Keep the stress off them at work. You know, being understaffed is just stress on the staff. So we need to support all our staff while we're doing this as well. So get over to everybody's page, find your local campaign, get involved. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, I mean, if you can't find a campaign for your local hospital, look up the campaigns that any of us on this show are mentioning. The one for South West London, the best local campaign for that is Keep Our St Helier Hospital, or COSH. Have a look on there. All of the activists that have been working hard to keep our NHS going have put a lot of time and thought into resources that are there available to anybody who wants to help us fight to maintain our NHS, because it absolutely has been stolen out from underneath us. It's almost like the audacity of this robbery is so great. People either can't or refuse to acknowledge that this is what's going on. And there's such doublespeak going on the way that the mainstream media cover this as well, because this idea of integrated care systems, it sounds brilliant, doesn't it? But what it actually
disintegrated care, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's disintegrated care.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, this is Orwellian. What it refers to is perhaps bringing social care in with the NHS, which I think is a good idea. But the real risk of bringing social care in with the NHS is that most social care now is means tested. And if you're bringing, and most of it's provided by private companies as well. So if that's going to be brought under the same umbrella as the NHS as it is, then what we're doing is we're simply saying means test all of our treatment, deny treatment, ration treatment, and so on, because that's what happens in the social care sector. We absolutely must stand against that.
We're also finding that the actual care is being fragmented between like tens and tens, hundreds of different companies. But not just that, the only thing that is actually being integrated at the moment are the budgets. 42 budgets are being integrated, and then they are then being handed to these partners, as they're calling them, which are private companies. Ultimately, more and more private companies coming in. The only integration I can see.
The white paper said that the budget would be binding on the local authority as well. That once that budget was set, it would be binding on the local authority. So you lose the democratic process in it as well.
Yeah.
But if you want to contact us, we're on SaveLiverpoolWomen'sHospital.com or Save Little Liverpool Women's Hospital on Facebook, or LWH Stays on Twitter. But we've also got a Twitter for Take Back the NHS, and if you Google that, you'll get us on Twitter as well. So, you know, there's lots of ways of contacting us, and we will definitely give you help if you want to get started. You know, we send Mary down to anywhere to get the campaign underway, and if I can catch a lift, I'll catch a lift. It's really important, that people realise it. But can I also say that two dates, if you like, we've got Ken Loach going to speak for us at a meeting, and he wants to speak alongside activists who are actually fighting for the NHS, like this today. So we're going to be writing to all of the campaign groups to see, will they come to that Zoom meeting? And you know, if you don't get an invitation, get hold of us and we'll make sure you do get it. And the other thing is, on October the 16th, we're doing a maternity day to try and show people the seriousness of the issues over maternity. Everybody says nice things and then they cut the services. The basic budget already for maternity is inadequate. Our midwives are worked to death. The midwives are leaving because they're stressed, because they're overworked. We've got to fight like hell. Nye Bevan said the NHS will last as long as there are folk fit to fight for it. And we're fit for that fight. We want that fight. We want to take it. But you've got to get onto your MPs as well. In some way or other, get onto your MP. Don't believe it. The Tory MPs aren't scared about this. They are scared about it. They are frightened. Michelle's nodding. Her Tory MP made a complete fool of himself over it recently. They're scared of this. And if we can get enough of them to just tell them to pause it, to stop it, so we can build up an understanding that healthcare free at the point of need, provided by the government from taxation, is the most cost-effective and efficient model that exists. There's nothing better than it. The waste in the NHS, in the US system that we're being pulled into, is a disgrace. The final thing I'll say is, please remember what they've done to mental health. Most mental health beds available now are private. And that's why there's day after day where people in dire need for mental health care, in hospital mental health care, can't get it. You know, look at what they've done to mental health. If anyone says to you, well, they'll never privatise it, say, well, what's happened to mental health then? Where's it gone? What's happened to dentistry? Where's it gone? You know, it's happening now, but we can fight this. Remember the footballers, remember what the football teams did, the fans did to overturn that Euro idea. Let's remember we can fight this, but not if people go, oh, well, there might be a good idea in this little clause of this. That bill's got to go. And we've got to make sure that our MPs know that. But please take back our NHS at protonmail.com. That's the email that we're using at the moment for the campaign. Get in touch with us or any way you can, and let's coordinate these campaigns and make sure there's something in the streets of every town. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well said there. I really enjoyed listening to that, because you're spot on there, Felicity. Just
Thank
before
you.
we finish up, I wanted to mention a comment that we've had in from Heather Nichols. And she says, we Googled the ambulance services being used the other day. They were all privately hired, but operating under the NHS banner. Now, this is part of the way that the government are getting away with privatising our NHS, because at the moment, the NHS is now very little more than a badge or a logo. We're seeing it. They tried calling the track and trace system the NHS track and trace system. It wasn't the NHS track and trace system. It was a private company that were hired for an extortionate amount of money that gave us a system that failed to work for a considerable period of time. And this is what's happening. If you go to your local hospital's A&E, it might say that it's an NHS A&E, but it may well not be run by the NHS. So the point is, we need to know that everybody working in our NHS is directly employed by the NHS, and it's public provision, so it must be publicly delivered as well. So it has to be done by people that are working for the NHS. Any other system will see more thousands or millions of pounds going into private people's pockets. I think some news came out today that the directors of these new ICSs are going to be receiving a salary of some £270,000. This is a position that's been created. This is where the money's going. And I always think it's quite a fallacy to suggest that what the NHS needs is more funding. It needs fewer sharks in the NHS, because if it's a bottomless pit, it really almost doesn't matter how much money the government give to it. It needs to stay within the service. Did you want to come in there, Jenny?
Yeah, a couple of things there. A few years back, we were at Health Scrutiny Committee. Our local ambulance service gave a report on the winter crisis and what they were going to do. Now, they said they didn't have enough paramedics, they didn't have enough transport. This is probably 2017. And what they're starting to do is when ambulances and cars, you know, they were all considered not fit to carry on to use in public, because, you know, after they're so many years old, they pushed that out 5 years. They're also replacing people with first responders, so you can get a car turn up. They won't have a paramedic in, so it's all downskilling as well, and that has been pushed out at least twice since then. So you're also getting a whole lot of volunteers going in there. Your first responders. You've got a whole team of them in your ambulance service. It is frightening. The other quick one was the head of our integrated care system has also taken over, supposedly temporarily, the next doors, which just happens to be Felicity's and Mary's ICS. He's taken over that as well. So what's he getting? Paid twice, 540, you know what I mean? Very frightening, very, very frightening. So there's a lot there to think about when you're doing it. One last quick thing on the privatisation bit. I've been speaking to Health Watch about us getting a public voice in these engagement meetings. Like I said, they're about to shut two hospitals in our area under this new hospitals programme. So we're trying to get a voice for the public in that. And Health Watch have come to us, and I had a call with them earlier on, and he said, well, obviously, you know, we're independent, we're a private company. We went out to tender a few years back, and we're a private company that are running up the Health Watch. And I was like, right. I was like, I'm going to have to look this one up, because that is absolutely amazing. They are the watchdog. We have a private company as a watchdog to make sure that our services are being provided. We're at a very frightening stage.
I wish I could disbelieve you there, Jenny, but I know too well that is exactly what we're going to see across the piece. I could carry on listening to you people telling everybody about what they need to do. Write to your MP, write to your local paper, phone up the radio stations whenever they're talking about anything health related. Make sure that as many people as possible know what's going on with our NHS and start making demands. Apparently there's 51 Tory MPs we need to vote down this bill in November. For goodness sake, let's make them do it, and let's look after our NHS. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on the show. Thank you, everybody who watched, and look out for the next Socialist Telly NHS show. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
And Michelle's showing her.